All right, so we got this new series here called Alien vs. Captain America by Frank Thierry. Now, I'll be real with you. At first, I thought this was going to be kind of silly, but man, this actually turned out to be a great opening here to a story. So this story is taking place here back in the day in the blood-soaked shadows of World War II. And there are whispers of Baron von Strucker that he is searching for something that could help Red Skull tip the scales of history. So we kick things off here with Captain America, who's knee deep right now in his investigation. And by investigation, I mean that he is beating the crap out of Hydra agents at Castle Strucker. So Cap, he wants to know one thing. Where is he? Where is Strucker? Meanwhile, Bucky is trying to help this poor Hydra agent to let him know that it's probably best if you don't have Cap ask you twice. So the Hydra agent, he responds back, he's like, my apologies, American fools, but I really only have one thing to say to that. And as he bites down, he says, cut off one head and another will grow. And I won't lie to you, that is not quite how I remember that line going. So then the agent, well, this man perishes. And I mean, this man looks ugly. So Bucky's like, man, I hate when they do that. To which Captain America's like, I'm not exactly fond of it myself. It does tell us one thing though, Bucky. Whatever Strucker's up to and wherever he is, it can't be good for our side. And that is the moment here where we shift over to the Himalayas, where we see a group that is currently making its way here through the snowy mountains. And they come across a bar lounge at the top of a hill. And as they enter in, we see that it's actually Baron Strucker, flanked here by Hydra agents. And he calls out that he's currently in search of a guide. So naturally, when a random stranger just kind of walks on in and then starts announcing and wanting help, everybody kind of just looks at him like, yo, what's wrong with this dude? So then Strucker continues on, he's like, and we're told that this was the place to find one, speaking of that guide. So then here, his right-hand man steps in, Hans, and he's like, specifically, we are looking for a guide who can help us find the fabled city of Adelan. Dum dum dum. So what everybody does is that they're just like, yeah, whatever, man, and they just carry on with their business, which is when Strucker says, he's like, all right, perhaps I shall make my position clearer. If I could introduce myself, I am Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, High Commander of Hydra, and this was not a request. So then this brave soul, this poor brave soul, by the way, walks up to him and is like, you must go. We want no trouble here. To which Strucker's like, I'm afraid, my guy. And then he takes that enhanced hand of his and he puts it over his face, palms this man's face, and is like, trouble has already arrived. So yep, that guy's dead. So then Strucker, once again, he's like, once more, a guide to Adelan. And then he goes over and he grabs this waitress and he's like, if I have to repeat myself again. And as he looks on here and he has these hands sizzling, somebody comes in and is like, stop. And he's like, please, no more. I will take you. So when they get over here to this next location, this like cave that they're at, this guy starts to explain. He's like, the people here, they consider those who reside in Adelan to be gods, and as such are fearful to disturb them, hence why they were reluctant to take you. But I will lead you to them and be rewarded, yes? And deep down in our hearts, guys, we already know what's about to happen to this man. So Hans, ignoring everything that this man just said, he's like, hold on for a second, yo, these markings. He's like, Baron, do you have any idea what they are? So when he goes over here, you can see the hieroglyphics that are currently on the wall here. That is definitely the original Inhuman family, the royal family. Black Bolt, Medusa, the others. But of course, with this being a different universe, their story goes a little bit differently. So Hans mentions here, he's like, they represent the lost royal family of the Inhumans. They exist only in legend. Legend that tells us that they were one of the most powerful and revered Inhuman clans in history. But they just disappeared. No one knows what happened to them. So Strucker's like, okay, cool. Get on with it then, though. Let's like find out what actually happened. So Hans is letting him know, he's like, listen, man, these things take time. To which Baron is like, time that we do not have. Need I remind you that the Red Skull sent us on this expedition to find the home of the Inhumans in the hopes of uncovering a weapon to win the war. As the war continues to go the Allies' way, the Skull has been disappointed in our progress, shall we say? So in other words, hurry it up, my guy. And then in this moment, man, we already knew that this was coming. Strucker then reaches into his jacket, pulls out a weapon, and then that guide, he takes this man out because he's like, we cannot have any loose ends. But as they pursue further on here, the guy that Strucker just shot, as he's laying on the floor, he says these words. He's like, good luck, fools. You wanted to see gods, but I took you to meet demons instead. So as they go deeper here into the structure, they're now underground here. And it's here where Hans starts talking about these ancient Inhuman hieroglyphics. He mentions how they talk about the lost royal family, how they ruled in peace for centuries. And then they were killed by a plague of creatures from outer space. And as he says that here, you can get a glimpse here, or you can see directly on the walls, you can see the carvings of the Xenomorphs. So then after Hans says this, Strucker is asking a question. He's like, okay, well, the question now is, where are they? Where are their riches? Where's their weaponry? We need to see more. So then he goes up here and then he presses this symbol. And when he does that here, that opens up this cave. And it's inside where it mentions that they see the skeleton here of the Inhuman king. But what they also see here is that his chest has been bursted open. And it's also the same thing for the queen. So then Strucker's like, all right, tell us more about this plague. And that's when Hans mentioned, he's like, the carving spoke of an Inhuman tradition, a tradition to bury the dead with what killed them. And in their case, this was it. Because then right in front of them here in this cave, what we see are a slew of xenomorph eggs, or I guess the official term here is ovomorphs. So then this fool Hans, he walks over to one of the eggs, right? And then we know what happens from there, because as soon as he does that, this egg, it opens up and then a face hugger just attaches itself to him. And then all that did, right, is it set off a chain reaction, because now the rest of them, they start jumping out too. So the Hydra agents here, they try to like retaliate. They start firing off shots and like blam, blam, blam. But of course, like that's not gonna do anything. Like they are getting swarmed on like crazy. And then this thing right here, this moment just kind of made me laugh, because Strucker's like, what in the name of hell are these things? And he's like, men, there are way too many of them. Let's retreat. But then there's this moment, right, where one of those face huggers leaps towards Von Strucker. And I'm telling you, this joint happened in like slow motion. You know, like those moments in the movies where it's like slow-mo and then you hear the music, the suspense music. So for a second, I'm like, oh man, this man's about to get it too. But then instantly, right, quickly, Strucker, he takes up that enhanced hand again. He grabs it and then he starts to vaporize it. But we don't see what else happens here, because immediately we cut to back up top here where we see some of the Hydra agents that are now crawling out of this cave. So they were able to escape, and they're like kind of relieved for a moment here, because they're like, close it, damn it, quickly. We're alive, the only ones. But then one of them is like, man, I don't even know if that even matters, because he's like, not for much longer, not after we face the Red Skull for this failure. But then here in this moment, out of the ashes he comes, holding one of those xenomorphs here in his hand, and he's like, a failure? On the contrary, gentlemen, the Skull will indeed have his weapon. So then what happens next here is that we fast forward here to this like Hydra base, where a group of what looks like prisoners of war are now being led into this dark and empty room. Now this gentleman here, he's questioning like, yo, why are we going into this dark room? Which is when someone responds back and says, or one of the Hydra agents, I should say, responds back and says, they don't like lights, Manelli. And the name Manelli is kind of important here. In the Marvel comics, we know this gentleman named Dino Manelli. So Dino Manelli here was an Italian-American movie star who was drafted during the World War II, and he served in a variety of Marvel teams here, including as a member of the Howling Commandos. And also as well, he was a part, or he was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. So after hearing this Hydra agent say they, Dino is like, they? And as they go a little bit further, someone says, it looks like something's in here with us. And when they look right in front of them, what do we see? We see some more eggs. And then one of them, they begin to open up. And Manelli's like, yo, we got to get on up out of here. But before he could even make a move, it was far too late. Because in this next moment here, what we see is this massively long tentacle that comes in and then slices one of the men in half. And then in this next moment here, what we see is the queen of the Xenomorphs in all her glory. But then we hear these, or we see these words come in that says, this new queen. And when we see who's talking, it's the voice here of Arnim Zola. He's like, we'll have to rein her in if she doesn't behave herself. But then after he says that, here comes in the Red Skull in the background. And he's like, as long as she continues to produce eggs, Zola, and we continue to produce specimens for those eggs, then I can release my new alien army upon the world and truly lay claim to this war in a way even Fuha cannot. Hail Hydra. And wait until you see how serious this man is. Because in this next beat here, days later, what we find are the Howling Commandos right now, and they're looking for where Manelli disappeared to. And we see a familiar face here. We see Dum Dum Dugan, and then currently who's leading them right now is Nick Fury. And as they continue to march on here, they come up to this village, and the sight that they see when they get there is just crazy. There are bodies everywhere laid out on the ground with all of their chests open. The entire village is brutally just wiped out. Now they're able to find one person that is like semi-alive. And when they go over to her, they're like, Miss, like what happened here? And she's like, Le Monstre, sent by Hydra. We were used as test subjects. We to breed whatever those things are. So then someone asked her like, what kind of things? And she's like, they're like big black bug things. Never seen anything like them. Never. And it's here in this moment where she begins to like convulse in pain. And then seconds later, what happens? We see a xenomorph burst from her chest. And this thing comes out looking gold and bloody. So then Nick Fury, he tries to grab his weapon. But my man looked like he was a little slow to the draw. But then luckily for him, here comes a red, white, and blue shield that cuts that thing in half. And then what follows that are these red boots that make sure that this xenomorph stays dead. So then Nick Fury's like, you know, I didn't really need your help with that. And we don't need no stinking Captain America's help with this mission either. So then Cap is like, well, to answer the first part, you're fiddling with your gun says otherwise, Fury, so you're welcome. And as far as the second part, considering that we may have a genuine war of the worlds in our hands, Uncle Sam says otherwise. Listen, I am all for this. This was fun. This was exciting. This was good writing. We got some good action here. What do you think? Leave it down below in the comments. Also, don't forget to leave a like on this video here for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you're brand new to the channel. Also, the notification bell so that you know when our new videos here do go live. Also, if you like what we do here and you want to see us continue to keep going, then there are multiple ways here to support Keepin' It Comic. Number one, you can become a channel member by hitting that join button here below the video, or you can join us on Patreon, or you can also join us on our website as well. And speaking of our website at keepinitcomic.com, there's also ways for you to support us here by grabbing merch that we create ourselves. So don't hesitate, go take a look. And if you have any recommendations or if you have anything that you would like to see us make into merch, you can always tell us that too. We appreciate you watching. And as always, thank you so much for kicking it with Keepin' It Comic. Bye.